NCAA Division I, D1, is the highest level of intercollegiate athletes sanctioned by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA, in the United States, which accepts players globally. D1 schools include the major collegiate athletic powers with large budgets, more elaborate facilities, and more athletic scholarships than Divisions 2 and 3, as well as many smaller schools committed to the highest level of intercollegiate competition. We believe a D1 approach is needed to develop cyber athletes with the talent and diversity our workforce and society needs. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers.
Hello everyone, my name is Ioannis Agrafiotis and I work for the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, also known as ENISA, where I'm responsible for the International Cybersecurity Challenge on behalf of ENISA.
Hi everyone, my name is Attlee Gamundani. I am an associate professor, cybersecurity department at Namibia University of Science and Technology. I'm also the chairperson of the Namibia National Cybersecurity Competition.
Hello, my name is Ron Pike, and I am a professor of computer information systems at Cal Poly Pomona, just a couple hours up the road. And I coach cybersecurity teams, also run a kind of a development platform for trying to train students at our school and others.
Hello, I am David Zeichick. I'm kind of wearing two hats today. I'm both the NCL Commissioner, which is the National Cyber League competition, and I'm also a professor at California State University, Chico, which is a small little college up in Northern California, but with some strong players in the NCL and other competitions.
Hello, I am also wearing two hats. My name is Josh Brunty. I am a professor of cyber forensics and security at Marshall University. That is in Huntington, West Virginia. We are Marshall. I have served there for 11 years and was, prior to that, I worked a number of different governmental roles in cyber forensics and digital forensics. My second role that I'm here, I'm also the head coach of the Season 3 U.S. Cyber Team, which will be heading into 2024. So I will also be taking the head coach role after our current team, and we're currently evaluating them in the combine.
Thank you. Our first question. Please give examples of the competitions your students compete in and why you chose these competitions. Josh?
Yeah, so we really just mainly based upon the nature of our program, we gravitate more towards CTF-based competitions. Our main focus is National Cyber League, NCL, and we mainly focus on that one because of the CTF nature of it. And it also covers a lot of the domains in which we teach in. We also play in what we call boutique competitions with our military and law enforcement partners. So we work with companies like Leidos, the U.S. military with Operation Lock Shields, to try to create meaningful relationships for our students so they can pipeline into jobs later on. We do play in collegiate cyber defense competition, CCDC, but we really don't place a heck of a lot of focus on it just because of the nature of our program. Wonderful competition, though.
All right, good to hear NCL already, thanks. So we also compete at my school in the National Cyber League competition. One reason for that is I actually have it embedded into my curriculum. So all the students that come through the program have to compete just so they can kind of see if it's for them. So it can be sometimes their first introduction to a competition. So I want them to see, here's cybersecurity, here's a competition. Another one that we do that I want to give a shout out to is the CPTC, which is great. It's the Collegiate Pen Test Competition. My students love that. They get a big reward out of doing that one in particular. And of course, they do a whole bunch as a club on their own, right? Hack the Box, Pico, and all those others.
We're kind of the opposite. We really focus on the CPTC and the CCDC, and we leave the CTF type competition. Students really direct that activity primarily themselves, And so we encourage it a lot. So all the same ones, NCL and Pico and all of those. But we focus on the game one, on the team ones, partly because we're trying to focus on not only the technical skills, but also these team dynamics, organizational skills, leadership skills, interpersonal skills, and whatnot. So the development of that, we're trying to put alongside the technical skill development.
Well, for us, it's mostly the attack and defense. I think this owes back to the history in terms of how we all started in Namibia specifically, because we were onboarded into this competition environment 9 years back, thanks to Prof. Amelia Phillips. Being from that background as well, she has laid that background on the attack and defense. We only started bringing our students to the capture the flag. And the main reason, if I want to emphasize on why the attack and defense, because we bring in our industry playing the red teaming, and that helps us to have that collaborative platform, and it cuts across various industries. And this is why we so much have been emphasizing the attack and defense. Of course, the CTF, we have encouraged them to start playing on their own.
So for Europe, things are a little bit different. So we don't have the collegiate system that you have here in the US. So we had to come up with something to incentivize all the member states to actively encourage their students to participate in capture the flag events. So what we did as ENISA, because we're responsible to maintain a certain level of capacity across Europe, we decided to reach out to all the national cybersecurity centers in member states and establish a point of contact. That point of contact then is responsible to create the national cybersecurity team for every single country. It is very nice to say that the majority of the points of contact that we have in Europe are universities, so the governments will not actually take the responsibility to train the national cybersecurity team. And then every single nation is responsible to form and train a national team. Now, the culmination of all these efforts of players is the European Cybersecurity Challenge, which we organize once per year, where all the different European countries participate. They select the 10 best athletes or players, and we do it every year. And we have recently started collaborating with countries outside the European Union, and we have now guest teams, for example, US, Canada, that participated in the past. And we really look forward to continuing doing this in the next years to come, because we've seen a huge increase in the number of students that now actually participate in local CTFs.
Thank you. Our next question, why do we need to develop our cyber athletes to perform at a D1 level? Ioannis?
Oh, that's everyone talks about the lack of skills that we have, and there's a huge need in the market for people with cybersecurity skills. So I think it is a great incentive for people to join the cybersecurity community. As I said before, we've seen a huge number of students joining CTF competitions once the ACSC got a bit more popular. For example, we have here Oli with us, who last year his team managed to win the ACSC, and they formally got invited to attend a breakfast with the Prime Minister, for example. So you immediately attract the attention of political power. So it's a great incentive, creating the equivalent of D1 athletes to attract the interest of the community.
Right. The main reason I would point out is looking at the cybersecurity threat landscape is continuously increasing, and the skills which are needed for our athletes to really survive into that world is one that can only be provided by playing at a D1 level. And the other aspect that I also look at is the need really to complement even our curriculum, which might not be sufficient really to cover some of the skills which there is needed in industry, which is one of the major reasons why they need to be playing at that level as well.
And completely agree. I think that you can look at this at a broad global level. You can look at it as providing, adequate, talent into the workforce, but I really think the focus has to be on students. And I think partly it's getting students' skills up to where they can be successful. I think a lot of it is really building their confidence, where students know they're not professionals yet, but they know they have a really solid foundation of good skills. They know how to use those. They've worked with others. They've had a chance to test their skills. And I think that the confidence that comes out of that sets them for success. And I think that's the focus of our program.
Yeah, I'll continue in on that. It definitely helps them learn how to work in a group, which is huge. I know if you ask any hiring manager out there, they really want to see students that know how to work in a group and can be great team leaders. So out of these competitions, it can show that they are team leaders and effectively work in a group. Going back to kind of what Dan had said in the introduction with D1, brings in money and fame and fortune. That sounds great. I'll take some of that to the university. But with that, it also can bring more attention to cybersecurity, right? So what we want is to have society know, so we could have some more media here and more companies here ready to embrace some of these great students that we have and competitors that are showing off their skills over the next couple days. So we want to have that bridge between the competition and the companies, because that's one thing particular for NCLs, what we're trying to do is build a bridge between building those skills and then connecting them with the company and having that company receive all these great students that we have here.
Yeah, so building on what David said, there's a term that floats around out there. You all have heard it. It's called the cybersecurity skills gap. And obviously it's real. We know that it exists because we see students traditionally graduating from college with the lack of skills that translate into the workforce. They're just things that we can't teach in the classroom. It's a very individual skill. We have done a terrible model of building cyber education the past 30 years. So, giving tests and then turning a person loose out in the workforce. So the nice thing about these competitions and cyber teams and competitive cyber that we're pushing here is that it rounds the student to the point that when they do graduate, they have team building skills. They have skills that easily more translate into the workforce. And I think that is something that we're looking to try to close that skills gap a little bit more. But more importantly is we're all here, or at least students are, to find jobs at some point, to make a living and have a lot of fun doing it and contribute to society. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to close that gap and provide value to society.
Thank you. One thing I love about sports is that it provides role models and success stories. And I think we desperately need these role models and success stories in our cybersecurity profession. The next question is, how do you know if you have students that are performing at a D1 level? Perhaps you can give an example.
Yeah, so really, how do you identify that? You identify that through a good pipeline program. And I'll take a minute or two and talk about what we're doing in the U.S. Cyber Team. We have developed in our Combine a pipeline program. Students that maybe are younger, that aren't necessarily prepared to be on our national team, we're going to bring them into a pipeline and give them the opportunity to learn, be mentored, and just be a part of the team while they're still young, in hopes that we may parlay that into being a member of the team. I'm going to throw out some stats for you here. So in 1971, there were 700 U.S. women playing soccer at the high school level, 700. In 1972, there was legislation passed called Title IX, which legitimized a lot of women's sports. And we know through that legislation, we've seen a lot of things happen there. By 1991, which is when the U.S. national team won their first World Cup, there were 170,000 women playing soccer at the high school level. Now there are 370,000 high school women athletes playing soccer. That women's team has won 4 World Cups, getting ready to hopefully bring home a 3rd straight World Cup, and numerous titles on top of that. How did that happen? It wasn't by chance. It was by first legislation, but development of a strong pipeline program. And I'll shut up now and say that, but that is a key to identifying talent, is to bring them into a system and continually evaluate and mentor them.
All right. And the women's team did tie last night. I know, so we're still going. Still alive. So for examples, in terms of if I know a student is a D1 player, what they'll do is they'll join the cybersecurity club, and they will spend a lot of time in that club. They'll take over as president and lead the club, and then they'll also come in and they'll give presentations to the club. So I know they're a D1 level when they're doing that. And then I know they can continue on, because what I see afterwards, once they've graduated and got a job, they actually come back and keep supporting the club. They'll come and they'll mentor students, and they'll talk to students about, this is how my career path led to my current job. So seeing them as that team player and wanting to make sure that all the students are succeeding, and that they also know that path of how to get that job. And more importantly, knowing that someone at that university got that path to a great job, it's just a great example. So a D1 player kind of has all those skills. Another part of the D1 player is just seeing them, rise to the top of the competitions. That's a pretty easy answer. And for us, what we can see is we have cyber rankings for NCL, so we can kind of see across the board how schools are doing. And talking about your pipeline, I'm really hoping that student players in junior high and high school, maybe they're looking at those power rankings and choosing which school to go to based upon who has a strong program. So that's kind of like the D1 model that I'm hoping will continue to grow.
So we also focus on, we call it pathways, not a pipeline, but we focus on pathways that are almost entirely co-curricular or extracurricular. That our courses give some foundation and whatnot, but students really it's when students take ownership. So we give them a pathway, and oftentimes students come and ask, how do I get good at this topic or that topic? And so we try to show them some pathways, things they can do, a certification they can earn, a club that they need to be a member in, all these different types of things that they might be able to do. And I really see that, I see that they have arrived when they come back and say, this pathway really is all wrong. I went to this conference and I found out there's this and this that I could be doing. And it's like, perfect. Well, we ought to write that into our pathway. But when they start rewriting the pathways and they start having the confidence that here's what I'm doing, and they really understand the industry that they're going after, and they understand how they have to pattern their skills. And they get that by talking to industry representatives through conferences, events like this one. I think that's when we really see them develop. And then on the flip side, then once they have matured, you see them doing well in competitions. I've never been really super worried about winning, although we have fortunately been doing some winning the last couple of years, which has been fun. But I really think that I really want to see our students show up and be highly competitive, where the students enjoy what they're doing. They know that they're good enough. They're going toe-to-toe with really good people. And if they come out second or third or fourth or fifth, I'm okay with that. If students know that they put a respectable effort out there, they knew what they were doing, and they build a lot of talent. Although, if you go, it is fun to win. It's more fun than not, so.
Right, building on the pathways Ronnie was highlighting, I like the fact that when I look at leadership, it's really marked by being able to create other leaders. And especially if I consider one to be a D1 player, I look back and reflect on the journey we've also traveled ourselves in the 9 years of running our national competition. We have seen the type of products that have come out of that, and the type of organizations which are really looking at asking for their CVs at the end of each game, because you've produced somebody who is able to fit into the job market, and that's one of the indicator of this is a D1 player. And when you look at how they also dedicate themselves to plow back by coaching even the existing teams, like you saw one of our assistant coaches from the Africa team, he's also a very good example that you can point out to in terms of how he has gone through the paces of being in the environment, being in the competition. So that to me is a D1 player in its embodiment, in a sense. And another aspect that I would really also emphasize when looking at how do we know that this is a D1 player. Being able to work under pressure, being able to collaborate across different fields, different platforms, working with different organizations, people of all from all backgrounds and even sizes as well. Because if you look at how we also run our competitions, we even have high schools, and being able to mentor even those youngsters to build them to that level, I think that's really should be one of the marks we should be looking at a D1 player.
So I have to say that they're members of Team Europe, otherwise, but I will be limiting the population to only 15 students. So I think a D1 athlete is those who actually participate in the European Cybersecurity Challenge, probably. So we're talking about a population of 500 to 600 people. And these people have been through local CTFs, then they have managed to compete successfully against maybe 10 and 15,000 players in the national CTFs, and then they've reached out the national team, and then they compete on the ACC level. Now, at Europe, we don't have the equivalent of what NCL have, for example, which is the Scouts report. So we don't have a very fair assessment of their success, but I guess you could reflect based on the ACSC challenge and see that most of the people already are being poached by many different companies. So now we're at the other extreme where we're trying to convince them to remain at the university, finish their studies, rather than, jump on the train and get a very highly paid job as a penetration tester in a company. So I guess this is a reflection of how successful they are and how they can prove themselves as D1 players. What I would like only to mention here, Ron, is the fact that at ENISA, we're more interested now in the pipeline and whether we could actually maintain the pipeline to have a successful D1 player. So my colleague Adrian is actually trying to now form a maturity model where we'll try to understand exactly what are the governance models for these national CTFs of every single country. We're going to create some measurements and some best practice, and hopefully that will increase the number of CTF competitions that we run, and also the number of D1 players that are managed to reach the top place.
My next question, I think, is my favorite question, and I'll preface it. If you have a D1 sports program, you don't settle for walk-ons. You recruit, but also you're actively involved in developing talent. At what age do we need to develop cyber athletes to perform at a D1 level? Ioannis?
This is a very difficult question to answer, to be honest. Speaking to some of our best talent, I think they've started fairly early on, and it's really impressive, thinking that someone started 10, 15 years ago to participate in CTFs, and back then in 2010 and 11, there wouldn't be aware of all the opportunities that exist at the moment. So I think that the right age is probably 12, 13, and I have no idea how these people started ages ago. And we're talking about people who would prefer at the age of 12 or 13 to read about Linux kernel rather than go and play football and basketball or whatever. So it's really impressive. But I think that we should target that age, 10, 12, early on.
I do concur with Jan on that part. Catch them while they are young. One of the observation we've had during our competitions where we bring in the high schools, we have seen they really have the talent. It's creating that environment where you can nurture that talent as young as is possible. And especially if you have an environment where you have created kind of like a sandbox, where at least it's controlled in a sense, and you know how to shape those skills instead of them just being scripty kids in their bedrooms. You now develop those skills into something that is going to be useful to industry. So I think catching them as young as possible is the ideal age for me.
Yeah, we do the same sort of thing. I mean, we don't have a choice in terms of recruiting. We're a state university, so the state determines who gets into our school and does not. But we do through our clubs. We set up the hierarchy of who gets onto teams, and that competition process to beyond competition teams. And they do a lot of outreach to high schools, and that really does create kind of a back channel recruiting process because students get to know our program while they're in high school. In fact, as high schoolers, they generally go and start mentoring and helping middle schoolers. And toward that end, we developed a competition that we offer to the high schools and to some of the middle schools that are more advanced to help them to prepare for for success in Cyber Patriot, but also really to then help build a bond between our program and them. So we kind of back channel recruiting, through our, student clubs. And I really think at first I thought that was really an unfortunate or bad way to do things. We ought to be able to go recruit, but I actually have come to where I think I really like it. And we're not going to change the fact we're a state university, so nothing's going to change. I doubt the governor's going to rewrite laws about this. So it's not really like there's a choice anyway, but I really do think that students, there's something really great about the student clubs being led by student leaders and them pushing this. There's a huge amount of development and maturation through that. And it also gives us a great nimbleness. If the university ran this, it would take 10 years to change a rule or to do something different. And the students are wonderful about pivoting as they find opportunities or challenges.
So for me, we did some outreach to our local high school, and this coming fall, one of the students from that high school is now the president of our cybersecurity club. So it definitely works. If we go out and I took the club to the high school, they did some cybersecurity training, led them through some competitions, that obviously raised the interest level, and then also they had a connection to our university. So it seems pretty simple, it works. Going back to the question of age, 12 sounds like a great time to start introducing kids to cybersecurity. And one thing I really want to point out too, at that age, we've seen studies that show pre-12, we have a lot of women interested in STEM. After that age, that number dwindles. So if we can really capture women at that age, girls at that age, to stay interested in STEM, then we can also hopefully keep them to staying interested in cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to wear two hats here. I'm going to talk about the U.S. cyber team and then my university's approach to it. So I really, kind of stemming on what David said, 12 is a really good age to start. And the reason I say that is we have stereotypes to break. Women and even young men think that maybe what we do is boring. That's the optics of what we're doing when it's really not. We know that, and we know that that's totally not true. But we do have that stereotype to break, and bringing them into a developmental pipeline from 12 to 16 is crucial. Teaching them the basics, getting basic terminology out of the way, and bringing them into where we can build their confidence, build their leadership skills, but start teaching them the technical skills in hopes that about the 16-year-old range that they start to actively compete in cyber competitions. Just as we would Division I college programs, that is really when heavy recruiting starts at 16 to go to college. And we want to recruit individuals for certain colleges based upon their expertise and send them to universities in hopes that when they're as a student in college, and then even shortly after graduating college, that we can bring them into our U.S. cyber team. And I think from this pipeline perspective, I push it a lot as a head coach because I can see the dividends that it's going to pay. And I promise you from our U.S. cyber team approach that you will see dividends pay on this at some point because we're going to place a lot of focus on that. And at some point it will pay off.
So I want to jump in with a story about role models and success stories because it doesn't just apply to those who play. It applies to those that coach and teach, although I do like the term coach better. So I'm going to talk about a school that I've had the pleasure to work with, and now Ron gets to work with. Troy High School, Fullerton, California. Started playing Cyber Patriot around 2011. And the person who started them was Commander Alan Stubblefield. He started with ROTC and then went into the open division. They play cyber like a sport. Past several years, they've consistently had 300 high school students compete in Cyber Patriot, and a number compete in other competitions. But they also bring middle school students onto the campus to play Cyber Patriot and be trained by high school students. They're not taught. They're trained like athletes, and they're trained by the students who are a few years older than them. They had 200 students from middle schools come onto campus and compete being trained by the high school students. So what does that do? It really turns it into a D1 recruiting ground for any college that wants to take advantage of it. And Ron, could you talk for just a minute on how you take advantage of it?
Shamelessly, we take advantage of it. But in fact, our teams, we've had good success. We've won CPTC the last 2 years. That we got second in CCDC this year. And people ask me, how do we do this in our program? Thinking that we do something in our classes or whatnot to make this happen. And I answer that we cheat. We start with students down at 12 years old, and we do that through programs like Alan's program at Troy, and that's really what got us started. We work a lot with Del Norte now, and Aegis and Franklin up in Sacramento, and a number of schools. But if they want more resources from us, because we have our college players help mentor their high school players, but we'll only give them more time and attention and access on our competition platform. We have a student data center that their students get to run their own cyber competition platforms, but they only get more time if then they're bringing in middle schoolers, and so they're basically competing, trying to pull more middle schoolers in because that gets them more training time, and it has been a phenomenal outcome. And so when people ask me how do you coach a cyber team, I said it's like being a soccer mom. You make sure the team gets there. You make sure there's orange slices at halftime. But realistically, our training, I teach courses, and there's a few things I can teach students that things that I know. But our students learn primarily from each other, and they learn from our alums and other professionals who are willing to come in. But our alum network is phenomenal about coming in and helping to train our college students. Our college students devote thousands of hours. In fact, I think within a year or two, we'll get into tens of thousands of hours that they'll be contributing to high school. And then you watch the high schoolers mentoring the middle schoolers. And I think if you're going to win in cyber sports, that's what it's going to take.
And that's football for our rest of world friends. By the way, I get to go to the cyber banquet, the sport banquet that Troy has every year. And they have one of the best booster clubs I've ever seen. So they have about 25 parents that are part of the Troy Cyber Booster Club. And I really think that every school that has students playing cyber should form a booster club.
Let me add something, because you're being a little kind with Alan there. Mm-hmm. This program has also won national championships. When the Cyber Patriot, I think it was 3 years in a row, they competed against every Cyber Patriot program in the United States and its territories and came in first. So there is no question that what he's doing there works.
The secret to his success is not teaching.
That's right.
The secret to his success is peer learning. The ways that the students teach each other creates the success. This is the last question, and we'll see if we have some from the audience. But I really want you to take your time answering this, because this may be the most important question. And you have an audience, and some in the audience may be listening. So the question is, what support do we need to develop D1 cyber competition programs?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think we need world support. Our U.S. government and through CISA and a number of other organizations have done a phenomenal job of supporting our U.S. cyber team. And I am hopeful that the rest of our competitive teams here have the support of their governments like we do. I think that is a key. I don't think, and all of us sitting in here, we may feel that. I'm starting to feel this, of how legitimate this is becoming. I don't know if you all feel that or not, but this is evolving into a legitimate sport. We were talking about this in the speaker ready room. You know, college football here in the U.S. was an intramural sport in its beginnings. It was not legitimate. You know, it was a few thousand, maybe would attend games, a few hundred. Only the elite schools were doing it, and then it finally took off. And I truly feel in my bones that 50 years from now, we might be part of the history lesson to do that. So I say to people who want to fund this, double down and put your money into this, because it will pay dividends, not only to what you're wanting to see achieve and the feel goods of everything to it, but it's going to produce people that will be contributing to society. But we need the money to do that. We need the funds to do that. Flying people here to the U.S. from Africa is not cheap. Flying people from the U.S. to overseas is not cheap. It takes money to do that, and we need private, we need public partners to do that, not just here in the U.S., but around the world.
Yep. I'll agree with that. And then also, okay, thank you. And then I'll also add company support. So when a high school player is obviously out there on the field preparing, getting the best at their sport, they're also hoping that they'll be recruited, right, to a college level. And then the college level, same thing. Hopefully they're going to be recruited to a professional level. So I want to see more outreach and support from companies, because they're the ones that we want to have these players being hired into. So more strengthening of those partnerships with companies so that we can have that pathway, that when they are competing and succeeding in these competitions, companies are there to gather them up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, though, that we need to create some structure around the way that we do the development process. I think there are companies that want to support cyber. I think it's hard for a lot of companies to figure out, how do I do that? Where do I jump in? And it looks like a million little things all around the country, and everybody wants a few bucks, and that's hard to try to make sense of and hard to contribute to. And I think government sometimes even has the same issue. And so I think that if we provide some structure, I think that the U.S. cyber team is great. There's structure there, and I think if we can provide a little bit more structure in our competition environments, I know we've finally created some structure over the last decade, working with Alan and then with more schools in our region. But I think if we can create more structure, if we can gain more market exposure to that, I think we can perhaps make it easier for companies to try to get on board, and for governments to try to get on board and support that. And also it means that we really have to measure what we do really meticulously, because everybody wants to see, are you really reaching out to everybody? And are you really having an impact? Are you having an impact on a big enough group of people, a diverse enough group of people? Is it really equitable? Is it made available to everybody? We need to find ways to meet those marks so that we make it easy for people to come support us. And we're trying to build a cyberplex. So if anybody's got like an extra 80, 90 million bucks, please come talk to me. But really to trying to make it an environment where you'll have everything from the 12-year-olds through professional. We would love to at some point to offer and try to work with the U.S. cyber team and having training facilities, but training facilities that have working professionals, that have college students, high school, middle school, et cetera. And so so if you got your 90 million bucks, please come talk to me.
Thank you. I like the way this was started off from Josh, and you have really hinted on a number of key aspects that we in our shoes really grappling with from the African team. But further on that as well, I would say this is a multi-stakeholder effort that's needed for us to build up that environment to say this is a D1. I'm visualizing kind of even like a tennis tournaments, how they are run, and you actually know there are even airlines that are earmarked to sponsor that. And normally, if you look at all those pieces of the puzzles, if they can come together, it's going to make a whole ton of a difference in a sense. And one of the support that's also needed is for private organizations even to bring in like peers or collaborators that are able to train even these upcoming D1 players that we are trying to develop, because once we have that skills transfer from those that are in industry, that's also going to help a lot. And another aspect that's also important, I see the moderator is also checking the time as well. I have a laundry list actually, but I'll just finish off by saying there is a need really for support from even the governments, especially because we have seen you can get funding, but if you don't have a visa, you can't travel still. So there's a lot. We need that multi-stakeholder approach in terms of assistance.
So I will definitely agree with what the predecessors have said, that funding is really, really important. But you also need happiness, and money can not only bring happiness. So if you have a look at the programs that the teams have now in place, they heavily rely on volunteers. And I think this is what they're highly motivated people. They dedicate several hours, and I think it is important to keep the loop, keep feeding players who become coaches, and then they become people who may lead these training programs in the future. So it is really, really important to have people passionate, who create the challenges, who create the training programs. But I also think it is very fundamental to get the support of the government, because when we're talking about reaching to the age of 10, 12, then you really need to identify what are the missing knowledge areas that we don't really know. So how do we approach someone who is 10, 12 years old? What do we need to teach them or educate them or coach them about in cybersecurity? What they learn already at school in terms of computer science, and then build a program from there on. But again, funding, volunteering time, and collaboration with governments, I think.
Let's give our panelists a hand.